I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Robert. We've been married for 57 years. And I need to tell you something that might shock you. For at least 30 of those years, we were barely holding on. Not fighting, not screaming, just waiting for things to get better on their own. They never did.
When Margaret says we were waiting, she means we made a decision early on that almost destroyed us. We believed that time heals all wounds, that if we just stuck it out, stayed married, didn't give up, eventually we'd wake up one day and everything would be fine. The problems would resolve themselves, the distance would close, the hurt would fade. That's not how it works. And if you're in a relationship right now, thinking that time alone will fix what's broken, you need to hear what happened to us.
We got married in 1967. I was 21, Robert was 23. We were so in love it was almost embarrassing. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. We'd stay up until 3 in the morning, talking about everything and nothing. We thought we'd figured out something special, something different from what our parents had. And then, life happened.
Our first real problem started about 4 years in. I got a promotion at work, which meant longer hours, more travel. Margaret was pregnant with our first child, Emma, and I convinced myself that working harder was how I showed love. I was providing, building our future, doing what a man was supposed to do. But I was never home.
I remember the night Emma was born, February 14th, 1972. I was in labor for 17 hours. Robert made it to the hospital for the last 45 minutes. He'd been in Cleveland for a sales conference, and when he walked into that delivery room, I saw something on his face. Guilt, yes, but also relief. Relief that he'd made it in time, that he could check that box. I didn't say anything. I thought, well, he's here now. That's what matters. He's working hard for us. This is just a season. Time will fix this.
It wasn't just a season. It became our life. I missed Emma's first steps. I missed her first word. I was there physically sometimes, but never really present. And Margaret never told me how much it hurt her. She'd make these little comments, "Oh, you're home early," or "Emma asked about you today." But I told myself she understood. She knew I was doing this for us.
I didn't understand. I was drowning. I had a baby, then another baby 2 years later, James. I was alone in a house in the suburbs with 2 small children, and my husband was a stranger who occasionally slept in our bed. But I kept thinking, when the kids are older, when Robert's career stabilizes, when we have more money, then we'll reconnect. Then we'll be close again like we were in the beginning. Time will fix this.
The worst part is, I was miserable too. I hated traveling. I hated missing my family. But I'd created this identity as the provider, and I didn't know how to step back from it. And Margaret seemed fine. She was handling everything. She was strong. So I thought, okay, this is working. This is what marriage looks like after the honeymoon phase. We were both miserable, both waiting for it to get better, and neither of us was saying a word.
Our 20th anniversary was in 1987. Robert took me to a nice restaurant. We sat across from each other, and I remember looking at him and thinking, I don't know this person anymore. We talked about the kids, about his work, about needing to fix the garage door, surface things, safe things. And then he said, "We've made it 20 years. That's something." And I smiled and said, "Yes, that's something." But I went home and cried in the bathroom for an hour, because 20 years wasn't something. 20 years was just time passing. And I realized then that all this time, all this waiting for things to get better, had only made us strangers.
I found out she cried that night about 15 years later. 15 years. She never told me. And when she finally did, I was devastated. Because I could have done something. We could have talked. We could have gotten help. But instead, we just kept waiting.
Here's what we learned the hard way. And these are the things we wish someone had shaken us awake and told us back then. First, time doesn't heal wounds. Time just gives wounds more time to fester. People say time heals all wounds like it's automatic, like you just wait long enough and pain dissolves. But that's not true. Time only heals wounds that are being actively treated. If you ignore a physical wound, it gets infected. Emotional wounds are the same.
When Emma was 7, she asked Margaret why Daddy didn't love us anymore. Margaret told me this in an argument we had in 2003. Emma was 31 at that point. I'd missed that moment by 24 years. 24 years where I could have known my daughter thought I didn't love her. 24 years where I could have changed. But Margaret didn't tell me because she thought time would fix it. She thought eventually I'd be around more. Emma would see I loved her, and it would all work out. It didn't. Emma and I have a relationship now, but it's careful, distant. We're friendly, but we're not close. And I can trace that directly back to choices I made when she was young, choices that nobody challenged because we were all waiting for time to make things better.
I enabled Robert's absence by not confronting it. I told myself I was being patient, being understanding, being a good wife. But really I was being a coward. I was afraid that if I said this isn't working, we need to change, maybe he'd leave. Maybe he'd choose work over us. So I chose silence and told myself it was wisdom. Time didn't fix it. Time made it permanent.
Second, problems you don't address don't disappear. They become the foundation of your relationship. By our 30th anniversary, we had built an entire marriage on avoidance. We had patterns. I worked, Margaret managed the home. We were polite to each other. We had sex maybe once every 2 months, scheduled around when we both had energy. We celebrated holidays, we visited the kids, and we never ever talked about the fact that we were lonely.
I had friends who'd gotten divorced and I judged them. I thought, well, at least Robert and I are still together. At least we didn't give up. I wore our marriage like a badge of honor. 50 years, still together. But our granddaughter, Emma's daughter Sophie, she's the one who made me see the truth. She was 18, about to go to college, and she came to stay with us for a weekend. And she asked me, very sweetly, "Grandma, do you think it's better to stay in a relationship where you're lonely or to leave and find happiness?"
Margaret told me later that Sophie was asking because she'd watched us all weekend, watched how we moved around each other like choreographed dancers who never touch, how we sat in the same room reading separate books, how we said goodnight and went to separate bedrooms, something we'd been doing for 8 years at that point. Sophie was asking permission to not become us.
And I told her the truth. I said, "Baby, your grandfather and I love each other. But we built this marriage on silence and waiting, and now we don't know how to rebuild it into something better. Don't do what we did. Don't wait for time to fix things. Time is just time. It doesn't have healing powers. You do." That conversation was in 2015. I was 70, and it was the first time I'd admitted out loud that our marriage wasn't what it should be.
Margaret told me about that conversation 3 days later, and I said, "Should we do something about it?" And she said, "I don't know. Is it too late?" We sat there, two people who'd been married 48 years, and we didn't know if it was too late to actually be married.
Third, waiting for the right time to fix things means you'll wait forever. We told ourselves for years that we'd work on our marriage when things settled down, when Robert retired, when the kids were grown, when we had more time, when. Robert retired in 2016. Suddenly we had all the time in the world. And you know what happened? Nothing. Because the problems weren't about time, they were about choices we weren't making.
I thought retirement would save us. I'd be home, we'd reconnect, it would be like the early days. But instead, we were just two people who didn't know each other, now stuck in a house together all day. Margaret had her routines. I had mine. We'd have breakfast together, then she'd do her thing, I'd do mine, lunch, separate activities, dinner, TV, bed. We were roommates with a shared history.
The breaking point came in 2017. We were at our grandson's wedding, James's boy, David. And during the reception, David's bride gave a speech. She talked about how she knew David was the one because he made her want to be braver, how he challenged her, how they pushed each other to grow. And I looked at Robert and he looked at me and I saw in his eyes what I was feeling. We don't do that. We don't make each other braver. We make each other smaller by never expecting anything.
We left that wedding early, drove home in silence, and when we got inside, Margaret said 6 words that changed everything. "I don't want to wait anymore."
I didn't even know what I meant exactly. Wait for what? Wait for us to magically get better? Wait to die still strangers? I just knew I was done waiting. 50 years of marriage, and I was done waiting for time to fix us.
And I said, "Neither do I."
Fourth, fixing things requires going backward before you can go forward. We found a marriage counselor. At 71 and 73 years old, we sat in therapy like newlyweds trying to figure out if we should stay together. And the first thing our counselor, Dr. Patterson, asked us was, "When did you stop being curious about each other?" I couldn't remember. That's how long it had been.
Dr. Patterson gave us an assignment that first week. We had to ask each other one question every day that we didn't already know the answer to. Nothing surface level. Real questions. It was excruciating at first. We'd sit at breakfast and I'd try to think of something to ask Margaret and my mind would go blank. What did I not know about this woman I'd been married to for 51 years? Turns out, almost everything.
Robert asked me on day 3, "What's something you've always wanted to do but never told me about?" I said, "I wanted to learn to paint, watercolors specifically. I used to see paintings in galleries and think about how it would feel to create something beautiful. But I never said anything because there was never time, and it seemed silly." He just stared at me, and then he said, "I didn't know that. 51 years, and I didn't know my wife wanted to paint."
I bought her a watercolor set the next day. Nothing fancy, just a basic kit from the craft store. And I asked her, "What do you want to paint first?" She painted our house from the view of the backyard. It wasn't good, technically, I mean. The perspective was off, the colors were muddy, but she was so focused while she did it. I watched her, and I saw glimpses of the 21-year-old girl I'd married. That intensity, that presence. I'd forgotten she could be present like that, because I'd never given her space to be.
5th, the relationship you have is the relationship you've built. If you want different, you have to build different. Time wasn't going to make Robert more emotionally available. Time wasn't going to make me more honest about my needs. We had to actively, deliberately, painfully rebuild our relationship from the ground up.
We started dating each other again. Actually dating. I'd pick her up at the front door at 7 p.m., even though we lived in the same house. We'd go to dinner, or for a drive, or just walk around the neighborhood. And we'd use that time to ask our questions, to tell each other things we'd never said.
3 months into therapy, Robert asked me, "Did you ever think about leaving me?" And I said, "Yes." 3 times seriously. Once when Emma was a baby, once during our 20th anniversary, and once in 2008 when you forgot our 41st anniversary completely. He didn't know any of that. And he said, "Why didn't you?"
And she said, "Because I kept thinking tomorrow would be better, next week would be better, next year. I kept waiting for time to make you the husband I needed. But time can't do that. Only you can." That destroyed me. Because she was right. She'd spent decades waiting for me to wake up, and I never did. Not until it was almost too late.
6th, it's never too late until it's over. People hear we started fixing our marriage at 71 and 73, and they say, "Well, good for you, but we're too far gone." Or "We've been unhappy too long." Or "We've tried everything." No, you haven't. You've tried waiting. That's not trying.
We've been actively working on our marriage now for 6 years. We're 77 and 79. And I can tell you honestly, we're closer now than we've ever been, including when we first got married. Because young love is easy. It's new. It's exciting. It doesn't take work. This love, the love we have now, we built it. Intentionally. From rubble.
We sleep in the same bed again. We have conversations that last hours. Robert knows things about me now that he never knew. I know his fears, his regrets, his hopes for the time we have left. We're not perfect. We still have patterns we fall into. Sometimes we still avoid difficult conversations.
But now we catch ourselves. Margaret will say, "I feel us getting distant again," and instead of ignoring it, we talk about it. We don't wait for time to fix it. We fix it.
The biggest lesson? Time is neutral. What you do with time is what matters. 57 years sounds impressive, but 57 years of waiting isn't an accomplishment. It's just 57 years. We wasted so much of it. 30 years of it, maybe more. 30 years where we could have been close, connected, happy. But we chose waiting over working.
If you're watching this and you're thinking, "My relationship has problems, but we'll work through them eventually," please hear me. Eventually never comes. Eventually is a lie you tell yourself to avoid the hard work today.
Time will pass whether you use it or not. You can spend the next 10 years waiting for things to get better, or you can spend the next 10 years actually making them better. Those are your options.
If your relationship is struggling, if you're lonely in your marriage, if you're hoping things will improve on their own, they won't. Time doesn't fix things. People do. You have to choose to do the work. And yes, it's hard, it's uncomfortable. It means confronting things you've been avoiding for years, maybe decades. But the alternative is what we did. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
We're not going to be here forever. Maybe we have 5 years left, maybe 10 if we're lucky. And every single one of those years is precious now because we're actually living them together, not just existing side by side. Don't waste your time waiting. Time doesn't care. Time will take everything from you eventually anyway.
Use it while you have it.
We're doing something new on this channel. We want to hear your stories. Have you been waiting for time to fix something in your relationship? What finally made you stop waiting? Leave a comment, and if you have questions about anything we talked about, anything at all, we'll answer them in our next video. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications.
And stop waiting. Whatever you're waiting for, stop. Start today.
Thank you for listening. We're just two people who almost wasted 57 years. Don't be us. Be better.